vocalize those questions because I can't see the chat while I'm drawing. So as always, just speak up, please. I know that's not always the best sort of situation, but I love the questions. I love being able to give feedback to the questions that you have in real time, and so I miss the chat, and then I can't respond quickly enough. Okay, so I am recording now. So what we're going to do first is we are going to just take the material and I want you to, I'm sorry, I need to move. I thought I was in a good spot. That would have been fine if I was left-handed, but I'm not. Okay, so go ahead and take the tool and let's just make a nice dark black. The lowest key value you can make.
Are we starting out with soft or medium?
Sorry, medium, please, everybody. Now, one of the things you'll notice is like I like to break mine. I don't like the long stick. I break it into about 2 inches or so. This allows me to use the tip and also the side simultaneously while I'm drawing. Right now, to make something really dark, I'm going to use the tip. One of the students in my other class asked me, how do you sharpen it? If you try to sharpen vine charcoal, usually you just break it. The best way to get a point to it is kind of just draw with it and like, basically like through pressure, it becomes a point. The other thing I would suggest too is just having a piece of sandpaper nearby, and you can just kind of like, or even like a nail file, and you can just kind of like roll the charcoal back and forth, and that can be a way to sharpen it. I honestly, I don't think I've ever sharpened a charcoal stick, but that was a question a student asked. So I'm going to have, and you'll notice that like, especially with the mixed media paper, the more charcoal you put on, it almost starts to lift off. And when that happens, what that is telling you is like the paper is full, like it can't take any more charcoal. So then I want you to sort of work on transitioning out. And we're going to be kind of like Thoreau about this, and we're not going to blend with our fingers. We're just going to transition out. Again, try to use the paper coming through the value as a way to change the tonality of the value. So just try to get a transitionary value mark, I guess we would say. And then do that again, as dark as you can get it, as low key of a value as you can get it. And then try to blend that out. And then feed back into it again. Now, when I did the blending, then this little area here is a nice open value. And so I don't have to bring the, when I reapplied the charcoal, I didn't need to bring it all the way to the edge like I did here, because this value here is already established there. Okay, so to do our first little drawing here, you're going to start by creating your boundary box. And just like you saw in my egg video, we're going to start off with like a very light gesture. And I want you to put a sphere in the center. Now see how I'm holding the tool? This is really only possible because I'm drawing vertically. Okay, this is one of the reasons why drawing vertically is so important. Plus, I'm also an arm's length away from my board, which is also important because I have the whole range of my arm. It's harder to make a sphere like this, but it's easier to use your whole arm to make a sphere when you have that space. So one of the things you can do if you can't put a board up on the wall is prop the board up in a chair across from you, and then you sit in another chair, and then you can judge the distance as being about an arm's length and draw that way. So in the last class, did we talk about light logic? Anyone?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, cool. So who wants to remind us what light logic is? Just shout out.
How you use light logically?
Perfect. Yep. Okay. So, let's think about our light logic. So that is the way that light moves through a space logically. Okay. So what does that mean? That means if you have a single light source, it's going to create reflections and shadows on the same side or on the side that it sort of always does if it's a single light source. If you have multiple light sources, usually that distributes light differently, and you have to really study it. But with light logic, there's this idea that if the light is coming from a perceivable space, that it will move through the space in a logical manner. So let's pull our light from the top right. Okay, so that means that we're going to have our shadow over here. Okay, so now that's our little gesture of our sphere. Now, we're basically just going to draw like an elongated shape like that to turn the sphere into sort of like like a stylized moon. And then go ahead and just apply value. Don't lose your drawing by making value everywhere darker than your drawing, because it will just disappear. We don't want that right now. But we're just going to apply value everywhere but in that light area. And then you can actually take your finger and just kind of like blend that. And again, you're just going to not go over your light area, everything else. So just like in watercolor when you leave your white on the paper. Okay, so now we've got our light and we have our overall sort of like middle range key values. So then we can go through here and just bring in a darker value. And with divine charcoal, what you want to do when you're blending it like that is just actually almost like tap it rather than don't put a lot of pressure on your finger because you'll always just wipe it away. So instead, you just want to kind of like tap it and kind of like smudge it around by tapping it, especially on that mixed media paper. So we can darken the shadow here. We know the shadow is going to be dark. The light's coming from here. So then we know that inside here is going to go darker as well. And here I'm fighting my paper. My paper is not being friendly here. Like that. So that is the core of the shadow. We don't want to bring the shadow all the way to the bottom because as you saw in the video, you have reflected light. That's the light bouncing from this surface onto the sphere. So we just want to pull that darker value through the middle, basically, of the shadow area. So the shadow area is like from here to here. The darkest place in the drawing is going to be where the sphere touches the surface here. That's going to be your shadow line. And then go ahead and just darken in that horizon line back there. And just like in the video, you can't leave any line. So what we want to do is we want to now make the background value as dark as that line that we just drew. Don't go into the light area of the sphere, but by making the background darker, then we're able to step the sphere forward. Sometimes in drawing and painting, this is called pushing and pulling. So I'm pushing the background down in value, and so that's pulling the sphere forward. Now you've got your little chamois, it's that little piece of leather. And so you can use that to kind of smooth your lines. Now your chamois is brand new, so often it erases more, but like it's one of those like annoying things where you have to use it to make it not erase everything, you know? So like you're gonna have to sort of play around right now with using it. It's gonna lift off too much charcoal, and then you have to put more charcoal down, and then it's gonna slowly be a really nice tool for drawing. Don't ever get your chamois wet. It'll just turn hard, and you don't want that. You won't be able to draw with it then. But especially on like a newsprint or something like that, you can actually do a whole drawing with vine charcoal and then erase it with the chamois, and it looks like it's never even been there. So it helps with the malleability of the material. So I'm now going to like blend out from that shadow line. Shadows aren't black, remember, they're not pure black. They are there's all kinds of light. So think about that. Think about in the skull contour drawing you did, how when you isolated the values, the contours of the values, that the values there were visible changes in the values in the shadow. I'm just going to keep going in and kind of like hitting that darker surface a few times right on that shadow line. And then through here, I'm going to go back through, reinforce the core of the shadow in the sphere. And then I can like just bring that down by lifting my tool off, so I'm creating like a much lighter tone. So when I want you to sort of look at value, like with your eggs, I actually want you to reduce and minimize your mark as much as possible. Later on, we're actually get a bit more Sero, and we're like leave marks and subtract marks and do all that kind of stuff. But right now we're just looking at values. So I just really want you to focus on smoothing out the values. So you're just using the dark space behind the sphere to push the background back and move the sphere forward. And so here we're using contour, y'all, but we're not using contour line. Like we are literally creating the contour edge of the sphere through an openness. You know, when I put my hand up like this, there's no line around my hand. Remember that line is an idea. It's a concept. It is a visual tool, but it's visually saying that there is that there is an edge to something. And yes, there are places where my finger ends on the outside of the edges, but they transition, they're smooth. They're not like a straight hard edge. And so line is an idea that describes contour, but it's not necessarily real. The argument there is usually like, well, what about a piece of paper? It has a lined edge, it's got a line to it on the outside. Well, it doesn't really. It has a dimensional change. It might be minute, but it's still a dimensional shift. And here, when we want to look at the paper, the thing that is allowing us to see the paper isn't just the dimensional shift between the thickness of the paper and the board. It's also the color of the board versus the color of the paper, and also the values of the paper versus the value of the board, and also the texture of the paper versus the texture of the board. It's not that there's a line there. It doesn't really have a line. And so line is an idea. So then just blend that out. Now, of course, we do start to bring line into value-based drawing. But it's line as value rather than line as describer of edge. So see if you can almost blend the dark value on the sphere into the background. And then you can push the background down, or you can take your chamois, or even your kneaded eraser and pull it to a point. And then just ever so slightly lift off some value over there. And differentiate the background to the sphere with just a tiny little value shift. Okay, so our first little sphere, sorry, I keep hitting the tripod with my leg. Questions? Okay, so let's do our 15-minute break. So now it's time to refill your coffee cup and have something to eat, go to the loo and all that kind of stuff. And then let's come back in 15 minutes for some more drawing. So Liz, I just invited you to a little breakout room on the side. Okay, so Hi, Brandon. So I'm going to start the recording again now. Okay.
It's been recording the whole time.
Has it really? Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, I'll be editing that out. Okay, I think that's what Liz was saying. Well done, Vaughn. There we go. That's a little embarrassing. Okay, so go ahead and take your chamois and just wipe away that drawing as much as you can. This isn't very good paper I'm using, so I'm getting a little bit of that ghosty drawing left, but that's okay. So effectively what you're doing right now is toning the paper. And usually when I work with charcoal like this, I will tone the paper first, simply because it creates a value for me to work into that is already established. So by that, I mean, it's a value that I can draw into. And so like now when I draw, I can use the tone that's there as a sort of a higher key tone. And so then that allows me to make a drawing quite quickly. So let's just do what we did the other day. Let's go ahead and we're using the medium charcoal right now. Go ahead and find 2 vanishing points in your horizon line. And then establish your corner somewhere. So I'm going to establish my corner more towards the left. And then just like we did the other day and we've done, on the computer, go ahead and find your orthogonals and build a little cube. Go ahead and take your chamois and then remove your orthogonal lines. And clean things up so that we just basically have our little cube left.
Are you using the soft charcoal or the medium charcoal again?
Right now I'm just using medium. Okay. All right, now we're going to switch right now to the soft. Okay. So grab a piece of your soft charcoal and again, go ahead and break it. Now, you don't have enough sort of experience yet to feel the tactile differences, probably. You may do, I don't know. But I can really feel the tactile differences in the charcoal sticks. So I get less confused. Like I can grab a box of charcoal, broken charcoal, and find the density that I need by feeling it. And you're probably not there yet, and that's okay. So make sure that when you crack your charcoal stick that you put it somewhere separately for soft and medium, because they do different things in terms of how much charcoal they put onto the surface. So we're going to pull our light logic from the top left. So we're going to go ahead and imagine that there's a shadow coming through here. And go ahead and just put that shadow in. And then you can just kind of like blend it. And then take the charcoal that's on your finger perhaps and just move it up into that edge, like so. So I'm just grabbing my eraser. I went drawing yesterday out in the landscape, so I have to find it. I thought it was here. I'm actually going to use this one. And so now we're not going to touch this side of the box. We're going to erase the top. Okay, so now we've got, this paper is really hot pressed, so the charcoal's really sticking to it. So now we've got, if we zoom in, we can see that we've got 3 values. Okay, so this really is looking at mass value drawing. So we have 3 values established just through the toning of the paper, the application of the darks, and the erasing of the lights. So there automatically we have dimensionality occurring. So now you can go in and you can start to solidify your shadow line. Again, the shadow isn't black, so don't make all of the shadow dark. The top edge here will be just a little bit darker, and you're using your soft charcoal. And then you can blend it into the tone that you made that plane. Now over here, we have this edge here that makes this value here, like this edge here is differentiating right now for this plane. But technically right now, that plane is the same value as the background. So we want to make a choice, which one are we going to push down in value? So I'm actually going to, over here, push down the value along that edge. So rather than redrawing the plane over there, I'm actually going to apply value to the background. So there's that push-pull. And y'all, this is always easy when you're making it up. You know, when we're drawing from life, this is more difficult. And so again, there's that playfulness with the Sirot of the open values. Versus the closed values on the shadow. So when we have that, then we also can have just a little bit of an edge there. Just apply that in there lightly. And so now we have a little bit of a box. This is kind of becomes kind of a nice little sun for me here. Went out and did some drawing yesterday at the sound, and the sun was just tremendous and sort of looked like this hazy shape like that. Okay, so go ahead and wrap that up. And then we're going to move on to our last thing before we talk about your egg assignment. So let's just take a couple minutes to do that. I'm just turning off my video while I eat my sandwich real fast because I haven't eaten today. But I'm right here to answer any questions that you have. Dante, you're looking for something in that bag?
Yes, my eraser went rogue.
Okay. All of you have them.
Yeah, I think I have my eraser already. I was too excited to get the other ones. I lost the meaty one.
Oh no! Oh no!
It'll turn up. Don't worry.
It will, because it needs you, and it's like, I'm here. Why don't you use me?
I need it. My box on the light areas. So
There, then I would just cut your white plastic eraser.
it's a good idea too.
Yeah. Now with the kneaded eraser to clean it, like it does this really amazing thing where you just pull it apart and it cleans itself. And I think I may have talked about that the other class, but if not, if someone finds out how it does it, please do not tell me. I want that magic. I have no idea how it does it. But to clean it, you just pull it apart, put it back together, and it's clean. White plastic erasers, you can clean them just like on your pant leg. Anything that's a bit abrasive like that will remove the outer layer. And that's a great way to clean the surface. Okay, so.
Are we done with the charcoal after this?
Nope.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So I'm gonna do something that I do in class a lot. And this is part of my teaching strategy, which is to help you to disassociate from the idea that every drawing is worth keeping and loving and protecting. So we're going to just take your chamois and just go right ahead and just wipe away your drawing. So often in class, sometimes one of my techniques is like, we get in a circle and everyone draws and like you move easels every time. And every time that you move the easel, you erase somebody else's drawing. And that helps you to get used to the recognition that a drawing is not sacred. Okay. That the drawing can always be reworked. The drawing can always be fixed. Like it's not a sacred thing. That helps you to make corrections. One of the reasons that students will leave something that's wrong is often they'll say, I didn't want to change it because it looked good. Well, if it's wrong, and it should always be changed. Okay. And that's just kind of the way that it goes. And I just remind students, if you did it once, you can do it again. And chances are, if you did it once, the first time you did it won't be as good as the second time you do it. So go ahead and erase your drawing. Now we're starting to build up a tone, but we're also starting to layer densities of charcoal. So we've just layered medium charcoal. Now we've put soft charcoal down. So the paper's getting really full. So what we really only have a choice to do now is to go to an even softer charcoal. And so in your kit, you have your 3 sticks of compressed charcoal. I believe you have 3 of them. Go ahead and grab your compressed charcoal. They are the more round, like 2-inch sticks. Okay. Now this charcoal is like the hottest chili pepper that you could use in a chili. It's meant to be used like if you're using it in conjunction with vine charcoal, it's literally actually going to lift the other vine charcoal off the page as you apply it. It will also throw off all of your value balance because it's the darkest charcoal you have. So if you add this charcoal to a vine charcoal drawing, two things will happen. First of all, chances are it will lift off the vine charcoal because of the density relationship. Second of all, it's going to throw off all of your values. So it's something to always be aware of, which is that the compressed charcoal should be used in conjunction with vine charcoal with care and consideration. Okay, but we're just going to use it by itself right now. And so we're going to use it within the same space. So again, we're just now using the tone that's already there. I'm just going to actually enlarge a little bit like that. And so we've already got this tone here. And what we're going to do is over here on the left, we're going to do like a little Bob Rossi kind of action here. We're just going to go through and kind of put in like a lower key value. Like that. You can blend some of it. And with your paper and your charcoal, it might be blending a little bit easier. But here, I actually don't mind the texture. Over here, I'm going to do something like that. And yours can look different, but what we're trying to do is just kind of do some different types of marks and different types of spaces. I'm using the edge of my tool like this, and you can see how small it is. Okay, so I'm just sort of, it's a different brand than yours. So it's square, yours is round, I believe. So I'm just using the side of my tool. Now what I want to do is inside this larger gray area that we have over here, and I want you to tap into your inner Thoreau. I want you to bring in some marks that are darker than the value you put down. And you can see my hand is kind of like, you know, it's kind of scribbling in there. And then keep that scribble mark along the top edge. Let it go different heights. Now this is the, you know, we talked about, like in the beginning of the class, we talked about the idea that like I can teach you how to draw a doorway using perspective so it looks factual. But I can't teach you to draw your feelings. And like drawing your feelings, that's the magical side of drawing, right? That's the side of drawing that is subjective. It's the side of drawing that is, you know, based on instinct and personality. So what I'm doing here is I'm laying in some marks. I'm going to use my chamois here to kind of like blend some of them. And then I'm going to leave some other ones open. I'm going to blend that. And I'm going to start to use what I put onto the paper to create like a landscape. So the dark marks are like tree trunks. And so I'm going to use my eraser. I'm going to erase light out. So this is subtractive drawing, right? Like this is drawing with the eraser. This is the eraser not as a mistake fixing tool, but the eraser as drawing tool. And so you're basically drawing with light. So I want you to now look at what you've created and squint your eyes the way we've been, you know, talking about doing. And I want you to do some, you know, artist, like, You know, my friend who's a killer artist, she's brilliant. She's worked in the Smithsonian, and you may even know her work. She does these like, she got really famous for these brass knuckles that on the top of crystals. And the piece is the piece is titled "When You Want to Realign Your Chakras, Mother Effer." And that's the title of the piece, and it became like a meme and got really popular as a meme. And she's a real, like, when I think of her, I just think she's like super metal, and like Liz might know what I mean, but like a lot of you are not quite old enough to sort of get the connotation there. It's like someone being metal is like something being sort of like industrial. You know, I'm thinking like sort of industrial music, and someone kind of hard. And she is a brilliant artist, and she says that this type of art is like the spiritual woo-woo art, like the art that comes from the soul. And she thinks she feels that you know, art that is it's coming from this place, this undescribable place, this like new agey place, she would describe it as, right? But I want you to kind of like look at the material and let your spirit, whatever that might be, guide you as you make marks. Define form with open value like we've been doing, and practice this idea of light and value as mark and texture. So I'm cheating a little bit because I did this the other day, but I'm building into what I did the other day. And I sort of created this space the other day accidentally. And so I made a whole lesson out of it. And I liked it. So that's how you all are getting that lesson too. But it really reminds me of this little like space that I saw at a chateau in France. And it was just like lined with poplar trees, and then the grass was kind of like at a dip like this. And so like I'm really going off the Bob Ross you know, deep end here, and thinking on a happy memory and kind of pulling from that interior space. So I don't know if I've told you, but I think it's really great advice for us now we get to value to remind you to not hesitate to go watch Bob Ross. What we're doing right now with mass, so this is mass drawing. Like all Bob Ross does is mass, you know, and he's looking at large shapes of darks and light to establish form. And that's all we're doing. And I want you to feel encouraged to remove a sense of hierarchy in our thinking. You know, there's this sort of sense that Bob Ross doesn't count because he's, you know, he's not Damien Hirst putting a great white shark in a tank of formaldehyde and selling it for $20 million. Like Bob Ross counts, like he's really important because people like him. That's what makes him important. You know, even my nemesis, Thomas Kincaid, counts because people like him. So when we are thinking about art, someone like Bob Ross has a lot to teach us. And, you know, it reminds me of like the Chicago school of thinking, this neo-primitivism, sorry, that they were developing in Chicago in the 50s and the 60s, where they were trying to relearn how to make art like children. You know, just because a child can't render a sphere with light logic doesn't mean they don't have something to teach us about art making. So I want you to get like kind of inventive with your marks, and I want you to use what we've been talking about with quantitative mark making. I want you to utilize quantitative mark making to build up value. Now, if you remember at the beginning of the quarter when we talked about value originally, we talked about the artist from the female artist from that did all the volcanic ash drawings of like of volcanoes, but she used volcanic ash to make all those beautiful landscape drawings. And you know, there, like, she's not just thinking about texture and value. Those are beautiful value-based drawings, but she's also like playing around conceptually with volcanic ash making drawings of volcanoes. Now here you can start to bring in the next element of perspective that we need to talk about, which is atmospheric perspective. So in atmospheric perspective, as things get further away, not only do they get smaller, but they get less defined. You've all experienced this in some way. So up front, these trees up front can be very rendered, very dark perhaps. They don't have to be dark, but generally they are darker in the front. And as they go back towards the back, they can get less defined and also much lighter. So one of the things I played around with my drawing the other day that I'm going to do here as well for you is I thought about, I don't know if you remember us talking about, we haven't talked about Turner yet, but there's this painting by Turner where he places this buoy there's a boat being pulled across the landscape, and then he places this buoy into the waterscape, and without the buoy, the whole drawing falls apart, and it's just like placed in the perfect place. And so I'm going to follow suit and place this post here. Now compositionally, that's going to bring me into the space with a thrust. And then I have a pause in here. Remember, you did your composition studies the other week. And so I have a thrust and a pause. Perhaps this here pulls me back down through here. These lines push me up through here. And then I have this larger, heavier space there. So we're thinking there about composition. So don't overthink your drawing, but I want you to kind of think about laying out a space that has energy to it. So these thrusts through here, these curving waves of value pushing us visually into this space. So go ahead and start to make your space your own. Don't be afraid to look at the values and say, okay, this value here I put down is darker than this value. Maybe there's a tree there. Just get Bob Ross about it. Okay, so we do this for just a few more minutes, and then you're going to share your drawings with me before we go on to the final thing of the day, which is the discussion about your eggs. So this is the painting that I'm talking about. We'll talk actually pretty in depth about this painting when we get to your emotional landscape drawing and the idea of the sublime. This is the painting's title is The Fighting Temerary Being Tugged to Her Last Berth to Be Broken Up. This is, when pulled in England. My country people say that this is the most famous work of art in all of England. And it probably really is, it probably really is, if not the most famous, one of the most famous works. And what I was speaking about a second ago is this little buoy over here, compositionally. And if you remove that buoy, then the whole painting sort of feels completely unbalanced, right? And so where you place things, even this piece of wood, where you place things within the composition can create balance or it can throw balance off. And so, it's just, we're going to talk about this painting quite in depth when we get to your sublime landscape drawings you're going to do. Okay, who would like to share their little landscape? Karamine, do you want to share your landscape?
Sure.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if we were supposed to be doing the same thing as you or
No,
our
it could,
own, so I kind of